One girl, one unfair teacher, and a truth that silenced the entire school. The afternoon sun spilled through the tall classroom windows, painting golden rectangles across the tiled floor. Dust particles floated lazily in the light, drifting between rows of desks where silence hung heavier than it should. The room was neat, almost too neat. Colorful charts lined the walls, their cheerful slogans clashing with the uneasy stillness that filled the air. At the front sat Amara, her small frame upright, her notebook stacked in perfect order beside her. She traced the edge of her pencil with care, as if organizing her thoughts might steady her heart. There was a quiet brilliance about her, the kind that didn't need words, the kind that often went unseen. Across the room, Mrs. Dalton stood near her desk, glasses perched at the edge of her nose, flipping through a pile of papers. Her movements were sharp, deliberate, every gesture echoing authority. She rarely smiled during class, and when she did, it never quite reached her eyes. The hum of the ceiling fan was the only sound between them. Outside, children laughed on the playground, but here, time moved slower. Amara glanced toward the teacher, sensing the storm beneath the calm, a familiar tension she had learned to endure in silence. Amara rose from her seat, clutching her homework with both hands. The pages were crisp, her handwriting steady, the result of hours spent under a flickering lamp the night before. She stepped forward, her shoes clicking softly against the tile, the kind of sound that suddenly feels too loud in a silent room. Mrs. Dalton didn't look up right away. When she finally did, her expression was cool, detached. "You're late, Amara. I can't accept it now." Amara blinked, confused. "Ma'am, I was helping my brother get ready for school. I finished this last night, I promise." Her voice trembled slightly, but it carried sincerity. The teacher's reply came sharp and final. "Rules are rules." A wave of quiet swept through the class. A few students exchanged glances, pity mixing with discomfort. They had seen this before. The way Mrs. Dalton's tone changed with certain students. Amara lowered her gaze, pressing her lips together to keep her voice from breaking. She walked back to her seat, her fingers trembling as she set the paper down. Her chest ached, a dull, familiar ache of being unseen. Yet deep inside, beneath the sting of humiliation, a quiet spark refused to fade, a whisper that said, "Keep going." The classroom buzzed faintly with the sound of pencils scratching and papers rustling, but Amara's world had gone silent. She sat at her desk, her denied homework tucked beneath her notebook, her mind already moving elsewhere. Slowly, she opened a blank page and began to draw, not doodles or idle lines, but precise shapes, arcs, and calculations that curved across the paper like a quiet symphony. Symbols flowed into equations, equations into diagrams. She worked with steady focus, her pencil gliding as though guided by something deeper than thought, something instinctive. The afternoon light caught the faint sheen of determination in her eyes. At the back of the room, a colorful poster fluttered slightly from the breeze of the ceiling fan. "Top Innovators of the Year. Announcement today." The words seemed to glow for a moment, unnoticed by most, but not by her. Outside the door, the principal passed by, pausing briefly to peer through the small window. His gaze softened when it landed on Amara, perhaps recognizing what others had yet to see. Meanwhile, Mrs. Dalton sat at her desk, red pen in hand, marking papers with growing irritation. She didn't notice the quiet brilliance unfolding only a few feet away, the calm before a revelation that would soon leave the entire room breathless. The steady rhythm of the lesson was broken by a firm knock on the classroom door. Every head turned. Mrs. Dalton frowned slightly, adjusting her glasses as the door opened to reveal the principal, flanked by 2 board members holding certificates and a large golden envelope. "Good afternoon," the principal said, his voice warm but formal. "Sorry to interrupt, Mrs. Dalton. We'd like to take a brief moment to recognize one of our brightest minds." A ripple of curiosity spread across the room. Students straightened in their chairs, whispering guesses. Mrs. Dalton folded her arms, a faint, expectant smile curving her lips. She already had a name in mind. The principal unfolded the envelope, cleared his throat, and read aloud. Congratulations to Amara Johnson, winner of this year's National Science Fair. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then came the collective gasp. Soft, disbelieving, electric. Amara froze, her pencil suspended midair. Mrs. Dalton's smile vanished. Her pen slipped from her hand and clattered onto the desk. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then growing louder, echoing against the walls. The principal turned toward Amara with pride. Your project on renewable energy has brought great honor to this school. In that glowing silence, Amara's calm returned. Not from fear, but from quiet triumph. The principal's smile deepened as he turned to face the class. Amara's project, he began, holding up a sleek photograph, was a renewable energy prototype, built entirely from recycled materials. It not only won first place nationally, but it's now being reviewed for a youth innovation grant. Gasps rippled through the room once more. The words first place hung in the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. He continued, Amara submitted her work through the school weeks ago, representing all of you, though it seems not everyone knew. His gaze flickered briefly toward Mrs. Dalton, who sat frozen, her face pale and eyes wide with disbelief. I didn't realize, Mrs. Dalton murmured, her voice cracking as the truth settled heavy on her chest. She looked at Amara, the same student whose homework she had dismissed not long ago. Amara rose from her seat slowly, her posture calm, her tone gentle. That's okay, ma'am, she said softly. I just wanted to learn. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then applause erupted, loud and genuine. Desks rattled as students clapped and cheered, their admiration echoing through the walls. And in the midst of it all, Amara simply smiled, humble, radiant, unshaken. When the noise of the day had faded and the classroom stood empty, Mrs. Dalton remained at her desk, the weight of silence pressing on her shoulders. The golden afternoon light had dimmed to amber, spilling across the papers she'd carelessly pushed aside earlier. Among them lay Amara's rejected homework, its corners slightly bent, her name written neatly at the top. For a long moment, Mrs. Dalton simply stared at it. Then, almost hesitantly, she unfolded the pages. Her eyes traced the lines and symbols within. Detailed sketches, circuits, notes, and energy flow diagrams. Confusion turned to realization, and realization to shame. It wasn't just homework. It was the foundation of the winning prototype, the very design that had brought their school national recognition. The same brilliance she had refused to see now stared back at her, undeniable and humbling. Her throat tightened. How many times had she looked without truly seeing? The paper trembled slightly in her hands as the truth settled deep. She hadn't rejected a late assignment. She had rejected genius. Outside, the hallway lights flickered on, bathing the empty classroom in pale gold. Mrs. Dalton whispered into the stillness, I was wrong. But the only one left to hear it was the quiet echo of her own regret. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the classroom windows, spilling warm gold across the floor. Amara gathered her books in silence, her movements calm and unhurried. Around her, the chatter of students still lingered with excitement, but she seemed untouched by the noise. Her composure graceful, her smile faint yet full of quiet pride. As she stepped toward the door, her shoes made a soft echo against the tiled floor, a sound that carried both ending and beginning. She didn't glance back, not even once. There was no bitterness in her eyes, only peace, the kind that comes when truth finally stands on its own. Behind her, Mrs. Dalton remained seated at her desk, the paper still open before her. The sunlight caught the edges of Amara's blueprint, making the ink shimmer faintly, a silent reminder of what she had failed to see. The narrator's voice lingered softly, like a thought carried on the breeze. Sometimes greatness doesn't shout. It waits, patiently, until truth silences every doubt. Outside, the world glowed in the warmth of the setting sun. And with each step Amara took, the story's truth echoed deeper. Never underestimate someone because of your bias. Prejudice blinds, but humility reveals.